All right. Welcome to Fake Dating Advice with Peter, the only show on the internet guaranteed to get you a large-breasted goth girlfriend. Unless it doesn't, in which case I take no responsibility for that. Why am I having a fake dating show? Well, because for a long time there's been all sorts of things within internet culture of the manosphere, pickup artists, incels, Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, all of these different things that I've wanted to talk about. And for a little over a year now, there's a streamer named Vosh who believes that the left is doing a terrible job by allowing young men to fall for these things that mostly have a right-wing bent, like scumbags like Andrew Tate, or the internet's Canadian stepfather, Jordan Peterson, telling them to clean their room. All of these things tend to have a right-wing bent. And Vosh and others have this notion that the left needs to politically engage with these young men in order to win them over to that cause. And on one hand, I certainly despise people like Andrew Tate. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about a lot of these different manosphere issues. But when I hear somebody like Vosh saying these things, and I see his streams where he's trying to give this like advice to young men as if it's a political project unto itself to tell young men, like, here's how to be more confident, here's how to get girls, I feel like all I can really do is split the difference, because it's not really in my wheelhouse to do this sort of thing or talk about these sort of subjects. But what I can do is, on one hand, come up with my own grift, but on the other hand, I can try and do this in like a live format so that if there are questions, I can pretend to be some sort of dating guru. So here's the pitch for my grift, right? Are you tired of being a magic card playing loser? Do you want to learn the secrets of getting the large-breasted goth girlfriends of your dreams? Well, then I am here to tell you the secrets. And I have made an online course, and normally this online course costs $5,000. But if you act right now and use the code BTGGF in the checkout, you can get my course for only $666.69. This is a limited time offer. You have to act within the next 20 minutes. That's my pitch. This is my scam now. I'm gonna turn on the chat, but in more seriousness, I have some clips queued up from Vosh and from some other people, because when I think about this issue, on one hand, I get the mentality that you want to intercede in these young men being taken down radical and right-wing pipelines. And the left, I agree with Vosh that the left, by and large, does a terrible job with that. On the other hand, again, it's not really within everyone's wheelhouse to go out and give advice to young men for things like dating. I can only joke about this sort of stuff, to be honest. And I think part of the problem, and I think this is a problem with the entire right-wing grifter culture, is essentially that on one hand, it's not so much a matter of left and right. On one hand, you have team intellectually honest and team bullshit. Or as I like to call it, the sophists who have mastered the art of the specious argument. The sophists were these people in ancient Greece who, ancient Athens was a democracy, but it was a more direct form of democracy, at least amongst property-holding men. So what they would have people that became called sophists, who would essentially teach the young men of Athens the art of rhetoric. Here's not how to be correct, be truthful, but here's how to win an argument, often through rhetorical ploys. There was one classic example where a man's like, there was this one sophist, and he asked another guy, like, oh, is your dog a father? And he says, yes, my dog's a father. And he goes, oh, so your dog is your father? And he says, no, don't be ridiculous. My dog is not my father. And he's like, well, are you a liar then? Because how can your dog be a father and yet not a father at the same time? You get the sense of just the ridiculous word games and rhetorical ploys that sophists would use. And a specious argument is an argument that sounds true but isn't. It often trades on common misconceptions or so-called common knowledge. So, to give an obvious example, there's this incorrect idea that people only use 10% of our brain. It's probably more like the majority of our brain isn't active all at the same time, unless you're having, like a grand mal seizure or something like that, when all lots of different parts of your brain are lighting up. It's probably a bad thing if you're using 100% of your brain. But this idea is out there that humans only use 10% of their brain. So a lot of movies have this specious premise that what if you could unlock 100% of your brain? There's been several movies that work and operate on that premise about using 100% of your brain. So that's a specious premise because lots of people believe it, so it sounds plausible, and the audience goes, what if you could use 100% of your brain, right? So the team bullshit, essentially, when they're pandering to young men, also gets to play on people's vanity, narcissism, prejudice. It never has to confront them with harsh truths. When you're attempting to soothe the young adolescent men who are insecure, who are trying to get a girlfriend and that sort of thing, it's simply easier to say, look, King, the problem is feminism. Before feminism ruined all of these things, us dudes lived like kings. And then feminism came along, ruined all of that, and that's why we got to get rid of it. As opposed to, and now I should put an asterisk here, because many of these people, they also soft pedal some like shape up and life advice, like maybe you should hit the gym, maybe you should buy better clothes, maybe you should clean your room, like the internet's Canadian stepfather Jordan Peterson, which he just ripped that idea off from a Navy admiral. But what I'm getting at here is that there's this whole cottage industry of basically soft pedaling what otherwise might be harsh truths to some of these young men. And when you don't care about intellectual honesty, you can redirect their frustration towards some political cause, like attacking feminism or attacking the left, and you don't have to confront them on their actual behavior, right? So I remember a while ago, this was over 10 years ago now, there was this incident with Rebecca Watson, and she made science and skepticism videos, and there was this one day, right, where she's, amongst other things in this 20-minute something long video, talking about how she was speaking at this conference, and while she was on the panel, she told everyone at the conference how much she did not appreciate being approached by men to try and pick her up after the conference. So, of course, they're hanging out after the conference. She's in an elevator, and this guy asks her to come to his hotel room for coffee. And she looks straight at the camera and says, "Guys, don't do that." And at first, this kind of flew under the radar, but then Richard Dawkins picked up on it and wrote this scathing, sarcastic piece of, oh, you think you're suffering? Well, what about all the women who have to wear hijabs and that sort of thing? And that drew all of this army of trolls to it. And I got the distinct sense that people reacted to what should have otherwise been fairly straightforward advice. If somebody has explicitly said they want to be left alone and not approached in this way, that it's a mistake to then go ahead and approach this person. I mean, that should be, what she said should be uncontroversial. But my personal opinion is what really drove people over the edge about this incident is that she said, guys, don't do that. The idea that there's inappropriate behavior that you can engage in still would seem to infuriate some men. Like, how dare this woman tell us how not to behave, how not to pick up women. The intellectually dishonest people of the world, they get to say, no, the problem's not you. I mean, it's perfectly normal to send women dick pics. It's their problem for getting upset, that sort of thing. Team Dishonest can coddle the people who have bad behavior, bad habits, maybe trying to gently correct their bad habits by like, oh, maybe you should go to the gym, maybe dress better, maybe clean your room, that sort of thing. But their attitudes towards women, their behavior towards women, they never have to correct those things. And a really brutally honest take when we're talking about, like, let's all give like fake dating advice here, is that a lot of men not only disgust me but stupefy me in their behavior when they're approaching and dealing with women. For example, like sending dick pics. Like probably every woman has complained about getting barraged by dick pics on dating sites, or getting approached in certain ways that felt creepy, or just had some guy following them around, stalking them, harassing them. And exactly, other than Me Too, when do we actually call out this behavior? Because there's, of course, the moment you have something like Me Too, then you have to have, well, not all men. But yes, but how are we as a society actually intervening in that sort of behavior? Because there are so many times when I've seen situations where it's like, you know what you're trying, like, dude, bro, what you're trying is not only not ever going to work, but I can only imagine that what your real aim is not to pick up this woman that you ostensibly are going after, but your real objective might be to ruin it for everyone else. That's the only way I can make sense of your behavior that is otherwise never actually going to work. Like, do you actually think sending a dick pic, or like, following a woman home, or just hassling a woman, like, do you actually in your mind believe that is a strategy that's going to work? Because maybe that's the real dating advice that we need to have. Like, shit you need to stop doing because it's never going to work, and you kind of coming off as an asshole for doing it. I think that's but again, when you're on team bullshit, you don't have to have hard conversations like, maybe your behavior is the problem, or hey, maybe your expectations of things are way too high, right? So I don't know if any of you have seen the recent documentary that got released about Boogie 28, is it 2988, something like that. I sympathize with having a number in your screen name because, being Tooltime 9901, I've luckily been able to change that slightly, at least as it appears on YouTube. But he's like this OG YouTuber, and there was recently a documentary that came out about him, and I'm going to show parts of it in this live stream. But normally I wouldn't cover something like this, because this is what the kids today might like to call a lolcow situation, where he's just the sort of person that people on the internet like to point and laugh at. But this documentary about him, there's a few segments that I want to cover, like when he's talking about hiring sex workers and how much money he spent on that. And there's some really telling things about his attitude towards women, and dealing with some of his friends that he plays magic with, and also later in, probably halfway, 2/3 of the way through the documentary, he gets a girlfriend that's significantly younger than him, and I want to talk about that too. But I feel like he's an example, and I'll get into it more when I play clips from that, of somebody who has attitudes that are probably needing, like, just a mentality and attitudes that probably need some adjustment. And again, the fake, like the Andrew Tates of the world, just get to say, no, king, you're not the problem. They are the evil feminists and so forth. But going back to Vosh and other streamers who have picked up on this idea that the left is somehow failing the men of the world by not adequately addressing male loneliness and men not getting dates. I'm going to play some of some videos of what I'm talking about to set it up more thoroughly. But I have some feelings on that because it's, again, aside from coming up with a fake grift, it's let's say it's an interesting political proposition. So let me switch over here through the magic of this thing. Okay. So this is a video called Why Men Are Falling for Grifters Like Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate. I have to really quickly make sure that I don't have this on double speed because I watch almost everything on YouTube on double speed. And Vosh is sort of laying out his perspective, and I'll let some of this play, and then I'll get into different parts of it. And for convenience sake, I made a playlist.
Okay, living as a man is difficult in some ways and easy in some ways, I think, relative to the other options on the table. And one of the ways in which I think it's difficult is that we have an inconsistent idea of what it means to be a man in the modern world. We have a traditional understanding, which is, of course, very patriarchal, very authoritarian, very, like strong, silent, keep your emotions in, that kind of stuff, And then we have a more like modern interpretation of what it means to be a man, which is to deviate from those behaviors in some but not all ways. We still like it when men are big and strong. Hegemonically, culturally, interpersonally, that is still a popular trait. Assertiveness is considered attractive, but assertiveness in the wrong way is considered creepy. A lot of guys fear being called creepy over stuff that I think a lot of women get away with easily because people don't see an innate social threat.
It's hard to watch this at normal speed.
At least not often. And all of this together, I think, means that a lot of people are having a kind of crisis of identity. And there are not many roads out of this. You see the manosphere road, where it's like, a society hates you, feminism has ruined women, and the only way to overcome this is to focus on the grind, focus on, don't care about women, make money, whatever. Not a good idea, I think, for the mental health in the long run. And a lot of these people, they're not going to make money just because you tell them to. This doesn't solve their problems. But a lot of the lefties' attitudes towards this is like well, you'll be more happy if you just check your privilege, reconcile the problematic aspects of your behavior, and, sort of detoxify yourself, get rid of the toxic masculinity. This is incredibly patronizing, obviously. First of all, the introspection required to just take negative parts of your personality and twist them off, this is an incredibly difficult task, even for people who have, that's like a lifelong thing. We are both the sculptor and the sculpture. It hurts to change yourself. And it also doesn't immediately solve anyone's problems. Being less toxically masculine doesn't make you more confident, make you more happy with yourself. It maybe means you're less likely to lash out at yourself and others when certain conditions take place, but it's possible that for a lot of these guys, anger is actually a cathartic outlet, in which case simply removing that actually creates more problems to their mental health. It makes them feel like they have no outlet. The solution is synthesis. You have to find ways to promote positive masculinity, not just talk down the toxic elements. And the left struggles with this because I think a lot of them consider it beneath them to have to give instruction on how men ought to behave in a way that is actually useful.
I think another part of the problem is, and what I think you captured so well in a bunch.
Okay, so he sets this up where, obviously, like I said, the right has these grifters, the left gives this patronizing advice. But what is interesting to me about what Vosh is doing is that he often gives this, okay, you feel meaningless, so I'm going to give you a left-wing alternative. But the left-wing alternative, in terms of giving advice to men, is I guess I would say almost I don't know how to put this, but I don't know if telling young men how to be more confident when they approach women is ultimately going to get to the heart of the sense of purposelessness that he's talking about. And the strange thing is that it's a very weird conversation to have in reference to the left, because my understanding essentially would be that what you would say to those young men is like, look, you feel this sense of what Marx called alienation, because you are a cog in a wheel that is trying to extract as much value from you as possible while giving you as little as possible in return. And that if you were not born into a relatively high social station, your odds of rising above, say, menial work that will slowly grind you down is small. And things have shifted so much in the last 40 years, probably before you were even born, 40, 50 years, that even the mythological ideas of rising above or achieving a certain comfortable status within this system seem out of place, and that you're really suffering from what's called capitalism. And workers of the world unite, you have a world to win and nothing to lose but your chains. That's what, like, in my head, that's what I imagine a leftist would try and draw everything back to, essentially. And apparently that's not the case. Apparently it's the case that if Jordan Peterson is trying to tell young men to clean their room, then what we actually have to do is, like, tell them to clean their room, but from leftists. So they're like, look, we all agree that you should clean your room, but, you know, maybe leave some of the right-wing baggage behind. I don't know. It's again, you don't necessarily want to beat people over the head with it, but let's talk about Andrew Tate for a second, because what interests me about Andrew Tate, right? Okay. Andrew Tate is basically a sorry, I got distracted by technical difficulties on the stream. Apparently the chat's not popping up, and I'm going to have to figure out how to fix that here in a minute. But anyway, so Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate has this weird pitch where he's like a all these 1999 movie tropes and ideas taken and put a spin on it. Like, he likes to talk about the Matrix. And he talks in this way that almost seems like he's giving a kind of Tyler Durden-esque speech. But instead of, let's say, Tyler Durden would say, you know, advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate to buy shit we don't need. And Andrew Tate would take that mentality, that sort of Tyler Durden speech, and say, advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate to buy shit we don't need. And the trick is to get out of the rat race so you can become a cyber pimp and escape the game, escape the Matrix, so that you can grift and be an e-pimp to buy the things you don't need. It's like this weird subversion of anti-consumerism, where the ultimate end game seems to be to win the game of the status hierarchy, which is kind of ridiculous. That's just not the way that human status games work. They're not games that you're going to win in that sense. But the left could easily provide an alternative to that. Because to me, somebody like Andrew Tate, aside from being a scumbag, is also kind of a clown. Like, he's trying to pretend to be this James Bond-esque person while using the sort of tricks that you would see in rap videos where it's like, look how successful I am with my rented everything. Look at my, rented yacht and my rented fancy cars, and project this image of this opulent lifestyle, this James Bond-esque persona. But it's all of a bit of an act to me. Apparently, I don't know, 14-year-old boys think he's top G or whatever. I have a nephew about that age. If ever found he was into like Andrew Tate, I would just slap him upside the head. Like what's wrong with you, kid? Seriously, grow up. And that's probably what a few of these need. But it would seem to me that when faced with somebody like Andrew Tate, the left-wing thing to do would be like, look, this guy's whole pitch is to keep you chasing these material things that, the socioeconomic system that you exist within is constantly putting out of your reach. If you want some basic dignity, some sense of purpose, you can get sense of purpose from a lot of things. It is true that human beings seem to have some psychological need towards goal-oriented behavior. That's why often you can get addicted to a video game that just has some loop where it's you're going out to collect the one thing to get the other thing to do the other thing in this game loop, right? How that behavior can become compulsive because a goal-oriented activity is something that your brain actually thrives upon, and you can direct that towards all sorts of things. But as far as the political dimension to it, it would seem that maybe you're not going to have the life that a 1950s washing machine advertisement pitched to you. But does that mean that you can't find, some sort of purpose elsewhere in life, that you can't develop as a person in other ways, or that you can't pursue political projects that might start to tear down the systems that keep you as like a cog in a wheel? Anyway, I'm going to attempt to try and fix some technical difficulty crap with the chat not showing up correctly. And in the meantime, I'm just going to continue playing some more of this Vosh video, catch up on the chat also.
A series of tweets is like, just the fact of reminding people that like the people that we're really talking about here are not like weird crypto fascists. They are essentially like 14, 15, 16-year-olds who are seeing stuff on like TikTok. And I can't remember where it was you said it, but it's just like, these are not Bond villains. These are just like confused people with some bad ideas about what masculinity is, and we can sort of counsel them through that, right? Like why the invocation to like make them into this like dangerous straw man. It's like the teenager is standing in for all of the sins of patriarchy.
Yeah, and the average person who falls into this stuff is not even aware of the conditions that they're responding to or creating. People get into reactionary movements not because they want to be the domineering victors, but because they think they're victims. Look at the language behind literally every reactionary movement ever. Ever. Even when to go as far as we can, the Nazis were at the apex of their power. You go listen to one there, the other speech, and interspersed between the, glory of the fatherland or whatever, is crying and whinging about how they're victimized by international Judaism. These reactionary movements, they cannot operate without the victim complex because the feeling of grievance is what drives them towards these perceived solutions. So, the idea that these people are just like Machiavellians who are choosing to be sexist because they think they benefit from that power arrangement. No, they don't. No, they don't. And also, no, they do not. They don't benefit from it. No more so than the white man benefits from white supremacy. He may be better off than the people he mistreats, but in fact, the life of many white people was made worse because the systems of slavery and labor exploitation, the institution of the police, which grew out of, slave patrols, these institutions are recursive. They hurt people who are not just of a different race, but of lower stature, of lower power. And race is not the only power hierarchy in our society. There's also class. There's also health. There's mental health. There's a lot of stuff that intersects. People do not, in the long run, benefit from systems designed to hurt those other than them. Or perhaps maybe a very tiny minority of people on top. The population at large, certainly. So I reject the idea that there is any Machiavellian self-interested intent here. I think people are sad and desperate and lonely. And being young people mostly, they're impressionable. And I think it's our responsibility to give them a narrative that contradicts the one that they seem to keep falling into.
What exactly does that look like for a left? Like, how do we sort of speak to these issues without like ceding any kind of ideological ground and sticking to the principles? Because we're not talking here about like abandoning feminism or anything like that. We're just talking about like speaking to a people before that they go down the rabbit hole of like far right manosphere bros.
Oh, the main thing I think you need is to teach confidence and self-reliance in ways that are actually positive. And the thing that's difficult about teaching confidence, this is pickup artistry fundamentally.
See, that's what I'm saying. I should say here, I don't have a problem with Vosh essentially. I don't have a problem with Vosh giving life advice. And he does talk about good things, the underlying aspects of where their worldview doesn't really match reality. But then again, if you actually watch more of his streams, it's like, and then we need to give this life advice. And again, there's no way I can personally take that seriously. Like, welcome to my new grift, where I tell you how to get goth girlfriends. Right? It's like basically making an expectation of much of the rest of the left that is not necessarily going to be followed through with for many people other than somebody like Vosh, who feels that's within his wheelhouse, feels like he has things to contribute on that matter. And it's easy to point to all the people saying that, or examples of, why should we do this? That's ridiculous. Too bad for men and that sort of thing. But there's probably another portion of the left that's like, yeah, that's not really my thing to give that sort of advice. And maybe we should actually focus on the part where we say, okay, I know that you think that they have these very clever analysis of the world, but if you really want to appeal to like a young man, 14, 15, into their 20s, you want to make them feel like they're clever and that you give them somebody to point and laugh at. So if you actually broke down some of their ideas and said, like, look how ridiculous this worldview is, and made them feel like the cool kids who were like, these right-wing grifters do have some really dumb ideas. Because that's what a lot of these right-wing grifters manage to do to much of the left, is make them look ridiculous and make young men and their audience feel like they're on the side that gets to point and say, look how ridiculous those people are. If you turn the tables on them in that regard, it would probably go a lot further than trying to give young men advice on being confident, because the brutally honest reality is that a lot of that advice is just not going to work for people. Like if you were like, okay, no joking, Peter, give me some actual advice on dating or something like that, I'm going to be Googling like how explain personal chemistry, because a lot of it comes down to things that are not rational or tangible, that can't be, strictly speaking, gamed in some simplistic way. And when you're faced with the reality that you can't necessarily game the system, and that there are certain things that have to be learned through life experience, that, again, team intellectually dishonest can take the bitterness and disappointment that might stir in some people and weaponize it for their own purposes. Whereas team intellectually honest just has to be like, oh, get good, son. And for that, I want to jump to a different video here. Again, I apologize that I cannot figure out how to make the live chat thing work, so I am just going to have to remove it for the time being. I did have this problem earlier when I was setting this stuff up. I meant to go live streaming earlier, and then it had some connection problems. It's been so long since I've used this crap that it probably doesn't like that I've neglected it and have to reset all of the stuff that needs resetting. And I guess lesson learned for next time. So what was, let's see, somewhere. So we're going to get a bit in even more Inception for a moment. Because in this video, it's like, where's the one where he's responding to Big Joel? So there was another video where,
or at least
why the left helped. Okay, so why the left helped make Andrew Tate. Now we're getting full Inception here, because it's me responding to Vosh, responding to Big Joel in this Inception moment going on. And let's see what part I have queued up here.
These issues. I don't know how any of this could have gotten done if there was this like tetchy unwillingness to appeal to these very basic drives for political belief. Does Joel even disagree with this? No. Not necessarily. Again, I'm not really trying to disagree with Joel here. I just think this stuff needs to be said, you know?
Are young men flocking to conservative movements because of some deficiency in leftist advice?
I absolutely believe that's true. I do. That's obviously not a...
All right, I'm going to pause right now. I really hope this isn't an Alibi Live pre-recorded stream. No, it's not. This is something a little bit different where I did try and put my thoughts together, cue some things up, and I have been reading the chat. That's why, like, that'll be an interesting thing. If you're making a fake live chat and you occasionally got to look at the screen, occasionally got to look over to your second monitor to see what's going on in the chat, and you got to do all these things as you're in the process of you're in the process of some sort of live setup. I see you there, but again, my idea was I was going to try and structure this a bit, wait for some people to get in, wait for some chats to get going, and then basically go from there. So bear with me for a second, and hopefully I got completely, once some sort of technical difficulty goes wrong, it completely throws my mind through a loop. Like the thing that's supposed to overlay the chat onto the stream not showing up, that just, like, things like that derail me. Anyway, let's continue.
100% of it, but yeah, I think we're hardcore dropping on the ball on this, and we have for a long time. For multiple decades now, the message from everyone outside of the left is that the left hates masculinity. They want to emasculate all men, and they're a bunch of like female supremacist like weirdos who are too stilted to understand basic social interactions. The consistency of this narrative should give pause to anyone thinking that there's no truth to it at all.
Or does it come down more to the fact that they were born in conservative households?
So, first of all, I do agree with Vosh's analysis that the right has successfully painted the left, at least within the United States and probably other parts of the world, as being entirely based on identity politics. It's like a strike. What's a strike? Wages and working conditions and all these other things. The actual sort of economic left tends to get shoved to the side. Even most of the parts about, healthcare or education, other sort of left-wing issues get shoved to the side as they focus on identity politics, because that is what's convenient for the right. The culture war is something that the right essentially needs, because otherwise, what are they going to do? Sell their ideas based on, all right, so when we get back into power, we're going to give yet another tax cut to the rich. And then when I control Congress, I am going to defund the part of the IRS that wants to go after millionaire and billionaire tax cheats, because that's going to save the American people money somehow. We got to get those IRS agents off them millionaires. That's what the American people really need. Right? If the right had to run on something other than resentment, there would be a certain upper and middle class that would support that, the sort of country club Republicans, the business class. But that is nowhere near enough people, given the pyramid structure of our socioeconomic system. That's simply nowhere near enough people to actually mobilize a coalition that would win elections outside of, very localized things. So they need things like the culture war to get people to vote for them based on whatever the cultural conservatives are shrieking about, or whatever, single note issue they will fight to the death over. And it's because of that, and also because of what the social media aspect of the left, I think, especially in the last 15 years or so, the left has aided and abetted in being painted into that corner by the right. And it definitely seems, again, with this team intellectually honest versus team bullshit, that things like feminism and social justice, if you're a cisgendered heterosexual white man, then if you try and enter those spaces, you have something to prove. You have to abase yourself. It can be sometimes openly hostile, or at least jokingly hostile. And on the other hand, the right will embrace that same group of people with open arms. Now, in the long run, those people who run into the arms of the right may find themselves in a situation where they are essentially end up more hateful and miserable and closed off than they would have otherwise. And in all honesty, not to put too fine a point on it, but I'm glad that I got laid before I even heard what an incel was, and that like I never had to fall down. It was never of an age where I was going to fall into some of those sorts of rabbit holes that I had my adolescence and young adulthood before my mind could become poisoned by that sort of social media, right? Because there are a few really just more self-defeating and sort of sad ideologies than a lot of that like black-pilled mentality that a lot of people have adopted. Like you're not any better off. You may temporarily feel some embraced by the right wing. You may temporarily feel that your resentments have been soothed. But becoming something like becoming an incel, or having this sort of animosity, whether it be towards women or minorities, if you join something like a hate group, a lot of these people ironically cut themselves off. While they may be embraced by a certain segment of right-wing people, while you may join the Proud Boys and punch each other in the arm while reciting breakfast cereal, you're actually cutting yourself off from the majority of humanity when you go down a lot of those roads like that. And so it only, in the long run, amplifies the problem. And it's not a long-term solution to these things, but a lot of people don't figure it out till they've spent several years miserable because they've spent all this time within that rabbit hole. And then suddenly they wake up and they're like, oh, I have all of these negative attitudes towards all kinds of people that otherwise could be my friends and improve my life and so on. But then again, going back to what I was saying, so I think Vaush is generally right in his prescription that the right has successfully painted the left into a corner in terms of what they're about and who they embrace, and the left doesn't counteract that, and it's helped the right recruit. But again, at the same time, I have nothing against somebody's attempts to give advice to young men, but to take that on as a political project, I'm still not entirely convinced by that. But anyway, I'm going to continue with this video and catch up on the chat for a second.
Told to believe conservative things growing up.
Well, what if we told them to believe other things? I mean, we can't rewrite reality here. Obviously, we can't like warp time to make it so everyone only gets left messaging, but we can do our part.
Who are Andrew Tate's major fans, and who are their parents? Who did their parents vote for in the last election?
This is a question without an answer. I don't like this. Whoever their parents are, that doesn't mean more can't be done. Also, by the way, worth pointing out, Andrew Tate's fans are like incredibly insecure, young, mostly white, but not necessarily white guys. I would be willing to bet that there are tons of Andrew Tate fans with liberal parents. I don't want to descend into essentialism here. I don't want to like it's like, well, we couldn't have done anything. Yes, you could have. We always can. We always can. Never tell yourself like, oh, this was predetermined. No, we can always try harder.
People do believe in an ideology that calls for suppressing others, suppressing women in particular. And so that's something we should think about here.
I don't believe that. I I don't really think people gravitate towards reactionary ideologies because they like suppressing others. I think that's kind of reductive. I think that people have very strong fear and anxiety responses that get preyed upon by reactionary movements. And one like because if this was the case, misogynists would not have to constantly promote their ideology through the promotion of anxiety. And the fact that they have to go through anxiety means they're trying to prompt a defensive response from the person consuming that ideology. The person is manipulated into it. They have to feel like the sexism they're engaging in, it's not an active determinative thing on their part. It's a reflexive, natural and unavoidable response to the external threats that they're convinced exist, you know? That's the way fascist movements like always propagate. They never frame themselves as the attacker there. And I don't think they're all like aware of the way this propaganda works, you know? And especially if we're talking about Andrew Tate fans, we really think like 12-year-old boys on Twitch are waking up like, yeah, dude, I love to suppress others. My male privilege in this patriarchy is good and I want more. That's just I don't
All right. So for one thing, it's funny because he says, well, they all have conservative parents. I don't agree with that analysis because I had conservative parents. And if you're wondering how I became semi-radicalized, and I wouldn't consider myself a radical leftist because I'm sort of pessimistic about the human condition, and I believe that there's an upper limit to our ability to organize. And if you're talking about any large-scale political project that we're going to basically hit a ceiling on what's possible because of our need to organize and yet the flaws that occur within that. But that's a subject unto itself. But I had conservative parents, and a combination of being out in the workforce, things like the Iraq War, I think helped move me to the left because it introduced me to certain left-wing thinkers. I was definitely shaped by Bush-era politics, but also just I too have felt a lot of the sorts of things that we typically associate with these struggling young men. Once upon a time, I was, poor, working a crappy job. It could, had reasons to believe that I was low on the social pecking order. But at the same time, I understood that maybe it was just working for like massive corporate behemoths that were, making hundreds of billions of dollars and paying minimum wage with no, little to no benefits and that sort of thing. Just starting to understand the realities of economic life and the the social games that you have to play oftentimes in these organizations, because we like to present the world as this like meritocracy where it's like if you work hard, then you can blah, blah, blah. And you start to realize as you go out there in the real world and work jobs that oftentimes the people who are promoted, who succeed in a lot of these corporate environments, essentially they're not hardworking, they're not the most intelligent. Very often they're people who are cronies and or willing to carry water for the company, and in many contexts like retail, for example, are willing to be bullies, because in that context, the incentive structure is that you want to get underpaid, undermotivated people to do as much as possible for as little as possible. And so bullies in that context are useful. And when you start to realize that people much higher in the pay grade than you are somewhere between mediocre and incompetent, you start to think, okay, why is this person actually in this position of authority with a higher pay scale and that sort of stuff? And you start to realize, the cronyism, and they're useful to the structure of the company, the incentive structure that selects for people like that. You begin to question things like meritocracy, and then if you start to question meritocracy, then you actually start to think, okay, I'm doing the work that is providing the value and making all of this profit possible, and yet most of it's going to these abstract people called shareholders, and those shareholders could be, investment banks. They could be pensioners, but they could just as often be, the founders of the company or the children of the founders of the company who are sitting there in their multi-million-dollar mansions while you slave away at their shitty retail establishment. And just the experience of working in those sorts of low-level positions in life. Yes, I could understand from like a dating point of view. You start to think in your head like, oh man, I'm broke. I can't afford dates. I can't afford to flex and look cool. I can't afford this and that. And you start to think that you start to attach your low status to your lack of success in the dating market. And maybe when I was, in my late teens or early 20s, if I was presented with these ideas like female hypergamy and, feminism this and feminism that, I might have been like, yeah, that's right. Rather than going like, wait a minute, this, what about this economic structure that I'm involved with? Like, what exactly is the source of my status, the opportunities available to me, and that sort of thing? I might have been directed into blaming it on women rather than analyzing the culture at large. But anyway, I think there was one other part of this video that I wanted to go over. And yeah, if any of you do have fake dating questions, because this is my new grift now. I got to teach you all how to get big titty goth girlfriends. This is my new grift because Vosh told me to do that. Because that's apparently how we're going to win. That's apparently how we're going to defeat the right. Is get the big titty goth girls will save the world. Anyway, I think I'm looking at my notes. I had roughly this part of the video queued up, and I don't even remember why. So here we go.
Money in kind. I don't disagree, but it's not just women. Everyone wants that. That's totally ubiquitous. Those are just generally useful things.
Mental part of being a human, of being alive, is struggling against your own will. Not doing things that are good can feel comfortable and easy, and doing things that challenge you can be really quite unpleasant. But you should try to do them anyway.
See, this is what I mean about the left's only advice being you should engage in self-critique and better yourself, which is very useless unless you give the incentives and the specifics on how to better yourself. Nobody ever got fit because they were told they should better themselves. They got fit because they were given like a regimented like diet and workout routine or whatever, or certainly that's more effective. Yeah, it's a platitude. I don't want people aren't going to sign up with the left because the left rewards them with salient advice like we can do better. People know they can do better. They need more than that. We need to be brave enough to actually take strong positions on what it is, what's worth doing. And self-betterment should be about like making the person feel better themselves. We're not going to get any work done here telling people they should better themselves for the sake of other people, because like, holy shit, as an entry point to an ideology, like, hey, why should I join the left? Ah, well, you can suffer for others' sake. Oh, you're great. Fantastic. I can't wait for us to reach 10 billion members.
Because you know that they're good. Maybe some of you listening.
Oh, wow. I just realized that my mic was muted. I don't even know when the last time my mic was muted. Shit. Anyway, I think I went on this long tangent about where to find adult goths. Okay, shit. Totally breaks the, Yeah, so I was probably talking for a good chunk. Hopefully with something like this, I can take it and I can edit out, or I'll have to put in timestamps, like skip to this point to hear the audio come back. Because here's me talking about. Okay, so because it was your question, I will restate some of what I said, right? So you're asking, where can I find adult goths? And then it said something like about high school. Why do they turn into after school? Turn into what after school? Normies? Okay. So what I started to say was that I'm like double checking that the sound is working this time. Okay. My first serious girlfriend, was like a proper goth, late 90s, early 2000s goth. And she like totally became a hippie after like starting to going to some festivals and doing some LSD and things like that. Just became an all-out hippie. So understand where you're coming from. Like where do all the goth girls go? This all age out of it. And what I said was that for one thing, I think part of the problem is that there seemed to have been a kind of event where the population began to dwindle. Like when before DDT was banned, the population of what's it called? Now my mind's drawing a blank after I said all this stuff before. Like the population of certain birds, like the bald eagle, declined for a period of time, like between the common use of DDT and the banning of DDT. And I grew up in the Adirondacks, and I did not see a bald eagle in that area until I was like in my mid-late 20s, which, I mean, that's part of their like natural habitat. They come to that area for like laying eggs and stuff like that. So the fact that I grew up without seeing any bald eagles in that area, that's not normal. And then it took a long time, but as their numbers recovered, then I started to see them in the area where I grew up, which is normal. And it seems like between maybe the early 2000s to relatively recently, a lot of girls who might have become goth kind of got sidetracked into emo. And emo definitely seems like one of those things that people just grow out of a lot faster and do not stick with. And so there's kind of a period in not an entire generation, but a cohort of women who might have been emo that are just mostly missing from the population because, like I said, they probably got sidetracked into things like emo, which I was always that person making fun of emo back in the day. But as far as where to meet them, if you can, I would say that your best bets, I would say shows, and this was another thing that I was going on about, but you're probably going to mostly meet younger goths at shows, but try like Ren fairs and cons. Now, they may not be necessarily dressed as goths, but you can kind of tell who is, because that's one of the, even if they have kind of sold out and tempered their look to be more socially acceptable, right? That it is going to be a situation where at a con or a Ren fair, that's where you're going to let their freak flag fly in a situation like that. But yeah, it's definitely not easy. But I feel like there's also been this counter movement, especially with my generation, where people are a bit more, like work culture has changed. So there are still fewer people who have been beaten down by like the demands of jobs and conformity to completely change their look because of a bit of a change in culture. But like I said in the part that must have been muted, that a few years ago I went to Montana because my mother is a travel nurse and she decided to go to a lot of different places before she retires. And I went out to visit her, and we went to like Yellowstone and stuff like that. But I went to Butte, Montana, affectionately known as the butthole of Montana, and probably the butthole of America. If you've ever seen this giant silver mine, it's this huge pit, and it closed about 40 years ago. And when you go to downtown Butte, yeah, you can tell you can tell the main industry of the town closed. But anyway, so as I'm driving through, there was a couple places where I spotted in the wild some goth girls. They were young. They weren't like age appropriate for me or anything like that. But I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, which is it? Is it that goth has finally reached Montana, or is goth kind of making a rebound? And my personal thought is that goth is making something of a rebound. Probably because they realize that young people kind of realize that you can pull that type of fashion off in a classier way, whereas you look back to your old, 3-megapixel digital photos of yourself as emo and go, oh my God, what the fuck was I thinking? Why did I dress like that? Right? Yeah, I think that it does seem to be one of those things on the rebound, but we're also living in a culture where, it's so much easier to get into whatever kind of fashion or subculture or pseudo subculture that you want. Like I'm like old enough to remember when if you wanted stuff like that, you would have to go to specialty shops in large cities. Maybe you could find a mail order catalog. Of course, there was Hot Topic, and Hot Topic in some ways probably helped kill it, ironically. But that's a story for a different day. But let's see, what else did I'm trying to think if there was anything else important that I said while I was muted, and I get to repeat myself. What I have queued up is this segment from The Dark Sad Life of Boogie 2988, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this YouTuber, but he did like game commentary and that sort of stuff, and I was never subscribed to him, but I would see him pop up occasionally for different things. Maybe I was looking up something about games or about magic or whatever, and I'd end up getting recommended one of his videos. I don't really think that much of him, and I had no idea the sort of arc of this person. But this is an example, and again, this person is what the kids today like to call a lolcow, and I'm not trying to do this to talk about this to milk the lolcow, but in the context of this battling dating advice, like the left trying to give dating advice versus the right trying to give dating advice. Like I say, the way I actually see it is there's team intellectually honest, in which case you might have to say to some people, like, look, there's an irrational component involving personal chemistry to this, and you can't necessarily gamify it. And maybe your expectations and your beliefs and your behaviors are a bit out of whack. Like, intellectually honest people might have to be more confrontational and deliver hard truths, whereas like the team bullshit gets to just be like, look, King, the problem is feminism. And I want to play a couple of these clips from Boogie. Like, you should just see this whole documentary. But let's see. You can see in this part, it begins, and this documentary, it begins with him in the bathroom, and he's self-deprecating about his own weight. In this, you see a scene where he's showing like the amount of like love handles he has. So this is somebody who, by conventional standards, is not physically attractive, is significantly overweight, and the documentary focuses a lot on his finances and what's he spends money on. And oh boy, guess what he spent money on? A lot of money on sex workers.
But that's every addict, right? Like Mitch Hedberg said, I'll just do enough heroin, and then he like OD'd on heroin.
I might have to jump forward slightly.
So I guess every addict tries to manage the addiction, but I don't know, man. We were talking about compulsive spending a minute ago?
Yeah.
Dude, I spent a lot of money on stuff. But you know where a lot of the money went? And like it felt really compulsive at the time?
I am a former sex worker escort, and Boogie 2988 was one of my clients. From LA, and I get a message on this website, you can probably guess which one, from this guy who looked a lot like Boogie.
I took women on vacations, and I took them out to fancy dinners, and I took them to like Disneyland and shit.
He bought me dinner, he got me a purse that we were talking about over messages, and he got me a couple gift cards, and he spent well over $5,000 on just that night.
You know the rules. The rules are we're gonna go out and eat. We're gonna have dinner. Maybe we're gonna fuck. And you're gonna enjoy a nice lifestyle that you don't normally get to enjoy.
So he was really funny, and definitely tell he was nervous. He did eat a lot of food. I'm pretty sure he got 2 entrees, which was very unique.
It's
God
not
damn
a
it, it's muted
revelation.
again.
I like beautiful women. I like to hang out with beautiful women, fuck beautiful women. We all do. I never got to do that. The women I dated were pretty, sure, but they were like Arkansas 8s, not LA 10s. With sugaring, I got to fuck some LA 10s, and I think that's cool.
We got back to the hotel, and I do regret to say that I slept with Boogie 2988. Overall, the experience, and I don't mean to fat shame or anything, but there was rules upon rules upon rules, and it took me a lot of time to find a stick. I am now married.
Okay, let me pause this somewhere. That's not going to get the video like demonetized or like the stream messed up. So that attitude that he's expressing, that like, look, let me reframe what I'm trying to get at here. So there are a lot of men who basically the point is not just to like get a relationship, stop being lonely. There are some men who, in spite of whatever they may rate on the attractiveness, they want that like they want 10s, because with people like Andrew Tate basically saying like, look, it's all a game, and you're going you got to get the high score by essentially getting the most attractive woman that you can for the sake of like your social scoreboard, right? There are a lot of people who have this mentality, and their expectations and what they want, they get this sense of validation, like Boogie was talking about. They get this sense of validation and what they want and what they deserve from essentially trying to play this, turning relationships into a social game where that's you get the high score by getting the hottest chick, right? And again, somebody like Andrew Tate, the team bullshit is just gonna be like, yeah, king, of course. That's the whole point of life, is to get the high score in the game of social status. And of course, women only serve as like points to rack up for that. And the intellectually honest thing is, aside from somebody like Boogie, who just, he got successful on YouTube, he got some money, he wasted a good chunk of that money on this. That's how you want to spend your money. And then much of the rest of the documentary is about how he's like on the verge of going broke and that sort of thing, which, he lost a lot of money in like crypto and that sort of thing too. But let's say that he wasn't somebody who had made a lot of money and wasn't super successful on YouTube. He was just somebody else. He was like the alternate reality where Boogie 28, whatever. He was just like a somebody who's not conventionally attractive, who's significantly overweight, who has no celebrity to turn on, no money to throw around for situations like this. The sad reality is that there are a lot of men who are in that situation, who have that same mentality, like, oh, well, I never got to do this, and it's something I deserve, and getting them to adjust their expectations of what they might get out of a relationship is it can be difficult. Like there's this one scene where he's showing some of his friends that he plays Magic with, and this almost makes me feel bad, because as somebody who's played Magic, I don't really play I only play casually now, but as somebody who's played Magic the Gathering since like 1995, under normal circumstances, some of these people that he's playing Magic with, right, they're going to be lucky to get Arkansas 8s, as Boogie put it. But Also, they seem like better people than Boogie. Like if you watch this segment, like I'd rather be friends with them than somebody like Boogie because he seems like a bit of an entitled jerk. But what I'm getting at, why I'm showing a lot of this, is because there are a lot of entitled jerks in the world, and there's also what I'll call the Dave problem, which I'll outline in a little bit. But there's parts of this where he's like, "Why don't you bring your girlfriends over here?"
I mean, yeah, a while out. That's fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, you've like had some. I think you have like.
I think he's a good guy. Yeah, I think that Boogie's definitely a good guy. He loves his friends and his family, and he cares about people a lot. And
It's just things like this make me ashamed. But then again, I've been to like game stores and stuff like that, and I know the reality of this. If you're a current Magic player, which you might be, please, for the love of fucking Christ, put on deodorant. Just there is my like life coach advice shit. Like if you play Magic the Gathering, put on deodorant 5 times a day. Okay, maybe not 5 times a day, but seriously, definitely before you go to the game store. So anyway, continuing on in this documentary, right? Then it shows that little more than halfway through, we find out that Boogie has a girlfriend. There's like a jump cut, because even the guy making this documentary is like, oh my God, I can't stand being around this guy. This is a fucking train wreck. But it jumps to 3 months later, and Boogie now has a girlfriend who is, let's say, maybe not quite age appropriate.
Down. Go lay down. Go lay down. Good job. Yeah, so I mean, things aren't great. People are still mad at me on YouTube. My view numbers are pretty much close to 0. I'm having trouble breaking 10K on an upload right now. And
Wah.
not everything is bad. I've got at least one good thing going on. Can I show you?
Yeah, inappropriately young girlfriend. Now,
So this is Desi.
am I the only one who thinks this? She looks like a
Yep, Desiree.
what's it called?
Months.
The woman from The Shining. I mean, of course, my mind is now drawing a blank. But she also seems like she might have that
I
like
don't know what it was. It was
squeaky
I guess
from.
energy is curly
Like man-
hair,
you know.
glasses. I must be into nerds. It's I guess I don't know,
Classic-
he's just adorable to me. I like him.
classic like Manson girl, serial killer worshiper type personality. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from her.
He was going through a lot, and I randomly hit him up on Instagram, and I told him that
Shelley Duvall, yes.
I support him and that I'm always here for him and stuff. And so it started from there.
On paper, it just doesn't really add up, right? It doesn't make sense on paper, but then practice and in reality, there was just something there.
So it was pretty crazy, but I just felt it. I felt an energy connection to him before I even met him, and I don't know, that's just how it is.
And then the longer we spent talking, I don't know, eventually you just realized we're the same person, doing the same thing, living the same lives, just at different stages. And
I can see myself getting married to Boogie.
This
I can
part's
definitely-
gross
see it,
because
yeah.
he's like,
In fact, we may or may not have talked about it a little bit, and we may or may not sit around fantasizing about it and thinking about what it's going to look like. And I called you wifey the other day.
see, that to me is emotionally manipulative. But I want to get to the part where she's talking about, let's say, I believe the technical term is daddy issues.
And you loved
And-
it. You were so there for it. If I proposed right now on camera, what would you do?
I'd say yes.
That's a good sign.
Boogie has improved my life tremendously. He just makes me happy, the happiest I've ever been. And I'm not alone, and so that he just completes me. Growing up without a father figure has its challenges. like you just don't have that support system that you would, and the advice that you need, and so it's just difficult. I don't ever want to be alone. That's another thing. Maybe that's why I have stuffed animals. I don't ever want to be alone, and so it's just nice to have company. And I help with the dogs. I get him his water. Like whatever he wants and requests. I just mainly is to take care of him. He takes care of me. So yeah, sometimes I pick weeds.
Yeah, I believe the technical term for this is codependence, right? Now, a lot of these manosphere, dating advice guru grifters, there's this very popular idea that women love assholes. This is a thing you commonly hear, like, oh, they love bad boys, they love assholes. I don't believe that. I have known so many women with perfectly normal, nice men who are not assholes. Now, I'm sure they're going to have this retort about riding the cock carousel or something stupid like that. But here's what I actually do believe. That assholes know how to find women like this. Essentially, there are a lot of people who are vulnerable, who, as she says, don't want to be alone, who are prone to be in codependent relationships, whether it be because of personality features, life experience, that sort of thing. And just like the bully, like the high school bully knows, like just instinctively knows how to single out the weakest link and attack that person. That like bad dudes know how to find somebody insecure and to like love bomb them and pull them into their orbit. And so even though women aren't necessarily actively seeking assholes the way that a lot of these pickup artists, manosphere gurus will try and convince you that they are, that men who are assholes, like, they are single less often than a rational and just universe would imply that they would be. Like, I remember just seeing, obviously there's the examples of, all the serial killer groupies and things like that, right? And like I said, she sort of reminds me of somebody like Squeaky Fromm. But aside from people like that, there and lots of like terrible men have had these female sidekicks, followers, whatever, stuff like that. Even just like random situations in life. I remember seeing this news story about this guy who he had a beef with somebody this was like a Florida man type story. He had a beef with somebody, and he met up with this person in like the local Dollar General, and he ended up following this guy to a fishing hole where he was fishing with 3 of his buddies and murdering 4 people. And then I'm reading the news report, and it says like his brother and his girlfriend are arrested as accessories. Or maybe they were just wanted. They were like wanted as accessories at the point. I think they were all caught at this point, and that they had been arrested. Yeah, because they had been arrested at what had been described as a family compound, which is like a trailer, a series of trailers out in the woods. So he's still living at home. The guy had like something like 250, some absurd amount of felonies, who had been in and out of jail and juvenile system his entire life, to the point where you think, like, how is this person ever out of jail to have committed these crimes? And the mugshot of his girlfriend, like, she wasn't anything great, but she was like slightly above average. Like, even in a mugshot, she was maybe like a 6 or something like that. This is like slightly above average. And this guy who by all rights, like, should have never like gotten out of jail for the 200 something other felonies on his record, and who is clearly a mad dog, because when somebody has that lack of impulse control, where they have a lifetime of crime committing, like, sooner or later those sorts of people tend to escalate to a situation where either they're killed or they do something that gets them locked up permanently. And yet this guy had managed to find himself a girlfriend, and just like some of the like scummiest, dustiest, broke ass people, like broke ass dudes, are able to find are like able to find women. And if you, it's not even a matter of, so on one hand, like I was saying, like the first part I was saying, okay, he wants LA 10s, and he has to buy them. Whereas given the way he looks, given his weight, like he might have to set his sights lower. It's one side of the equation, right? The other side, adjusting expectations, there's like the other side of the equation where if you're willing to be like immoral, like take advantage of people, exploit their codependence, and for somebody like Boogie, I mean, he might not even, given his own personality disorders, might not even realize that this is what he's doing. But if you're willing to be unscrupulous and just, love bomb somebody with, codependency issues and attachment and abandonment issues, then you too can find yourself a girlfriend. It's like a different kind of not having standards, if that makes sense. Like if you like your partner, self-confident and secure, that might be part of the reason that, that might be part of why you're not partnered with somebody. Because like self-confident, secure people, like you might get along with them, and maybe the romantic chemistry will be there, maybe it's not. But if you find somebody that just like wants to latch on to somebody because they don't want to be alone, and you love bomb them, well, then you can be overweight and broke and 1 foot in the grave from health issues and leverage your minor internet celebrity status to get somebody. What is she, like 20-something years younger than him? Like definitely young enough to be his daughter. But later on, I definitely recommend watching this documentary. Later on in the video, he goes on what's supposed to be like this shamanic journey where he takes, I don't remember what he takes. He takes some sort of a psychedelic drug, and the guy in this part of the documentary where he's trying to pitch him about how it resets all the atoms in your brain. It's like, no, it's not like Time Lord regeneration, okay? You're not going to take mushrooms and magically become a different person. Not that I would ever know, because I am straight edge and have never done a drug in my life. Okay, that part was just in case employers were listening. Anyway, let me see. Let me switch back to, let's jump to full screen. Go back to full screen. I feel like I need something here where I can like put something on screen and yet pause for a minute to catch up with the chat. But I'm going to turn my attention over to the chat. There's at least enough people in here that I can I can keep a conversation going by responding to some of the people in the chat. Do you go to a lot of punk shows? We didn't get too many of those. We don't get too many of those. Yeah, I try to. I've been trying to more often, but the older I get, the more I'm like going to shows where you actually, have to deal with Ticketmaster and sit down. The most recent show I went to, I don't know if irony is probably not the right word, but I went to see Tool. That was the most recent show that I went to. And I also saw Heilung, which is this like European pagan folk metal band. They were amazing. It felt more like watching some sort of Scandinavian opera than it was a conventional concert, because there was definitely a performance aspect to it. But yeah, that show was great. Let's see. There was another there was a comment that I saw here that it was something about learning tarot. It was in the context of like trying to find adult, trying to find. Yeah, Puppysoft said, gotcha. Hit the magic or occult stores. Learn about tarot, crystals, and star signs. I gotta say, real talk, the hippie to right-wing fascist pipeline is real. Like, it's probably even more real than the this sort of like angsty young man to fascist pipeline that Vosh might be talking about, and I feel like it's maybe not as commonly talked about as the young men situation, probably because young men are, to put it bluntly, more dangerous. If you look at people involved in violent extremism, it's overwhelmingly young men. And just any sort of violent crime in general, it's just overwhelmingly young men. And that's probably been the case throughout all of history, right? But what I started to get at was that in my life, I've experienced several examples where I just no longer believe in the whole I'm a cool, peace-loving hippie chick vibe. I just don't. I steer clear of that entirely. And I think it really started because of a family friend who this was over 20 years ago now, but this is somebody I'd known since I was a small child. Like I said, a family friend, or I should say friend of my mother's. My father thought she was a dipshit, but at some point in my late teen years, she must have she got in a relationship with a man who was like a full-on white separatist, former KKK person. I think they met at like a music festival because of course they'd meet at a music festival. And this woman used to be the love everybody, literal hug a tree, peace, love, the 60s never died flower child type person. And one time I think it was about 20 years ago now, I went up to watch her house for the summer because they were going around doing music festivals. And I hadn't really met this guy that she was involved with. And there was a complete personality change in this woman. She's just taken all of his most repugnant ideas and regurgitated them, and were like really militant about it. Now, like, I met this guy, and he was like the sort of guy that you could tell that he believed what he believed, and he wasn't, you weren't going to rattle him if you like challenge him outright. But he wasn't like the openly like ranting about this, that, or the other thing type of white separatist racist type. He was surprisingly chill for having repugnant views, but she had just totally taken it on board, and it was more than that because it was like personal too. She said some things about my sister, who at the time my former brother-in-law was Puerto Rican. She said things about my sister, my nephew, and at one point she like had a friend that lived up the street from her. She's like, I don't want that Mexican girl over at my house. And it was just like, it was at the time 20 years ago, before like the hippie to right-wing fascist pipeline became more obvious, like the QAnon, the hippie to QAnon pipeline became obvious. I was just completely, like, my mind was blown, like, what the hell happened to you, lady? And insulted, because, I mean, the brutally honest truth is, given who I am, it's sort of hard to be personally offended by things like that. Like, not that I'm, if you start like spouting off racist stuff, I'm going to think you're an asshole, but I'm not going to necessarily take it personal in that way. But in this situation, like, she made it personal by insulting like my sister and my nephew and my friend that lived down the road from her. And later on, I met other people that were just like, they're maybe a little kooky, and it's just like the internet and the rabbit holes and the conspiracy theories, the QAnon sort of stuff, got their hooks into them, and they just went right down that pipeline. And like, I'm telling you, I don't care how hot she is, like, you gotta really watch out if she's into like the woo-woo stuff. Like, oh, I'm into astrology and crystals and tarot. Like, it may seem kind of charming at first, or like, I understand why it may seem charming and like something you can overlook, but just really watch out, because it's just like, when you have that kind of I should say that it's worth analyzing that, but instead of trying to like personally analyze that, I don't know if any of you have heard of a podcast called Conspirituality. it really talks a lot about the sort of the new age to QAnon or conspiracy theory pipeline. It's a great podcast, and they also put out a book recently that sort of gives the more refined, condensed version of a lot of what they say. But there are a lot of in part I think it's just the empty-headed mentality where the mental tricks that they teach you to just get you to accept woo-woo disables. It's like how do I say this with not like this is kind of crude to say, but it's almost like a lot of this new age woo-woo thinking is like epistemological AIDS. I know this is sort of but like you're talking about like a virus that shuts off people's immune system. Like if critical thinking is your mental immune system, then a lot of this woo-woo thinking involves like shutting off your critical thinking, like your mental immune system. And so once you're willing to accept like things on the basis of like feeling it to be true, or the vibrations or whatever, like this sort of mental tricks that get you to accept the woo-woo new age way of thinking. Once you've accepted that, it starts to shut off the critical thinking parts of your brain. And of course there's always been a certain amount of overlap. A lot of these kooky conspiratorial ideas and ancient aliens, like that, there's always been that kind of a overlap with the new age. But anyway, what I meant to say is if the adult goth chick has like turned into that kind of crystal astrology new age person, and maybe they're still somewhat down to earth, having been formerly goth, but don't approach with caution is what I'm saying, because the new age peace and love hippie to QAnon fascist pipeline is real. Anyway, let me try and catch up on the chat here. One of those women love writing letters to Scott Peterson. Yeah, it's just like, I know you didn't do it. I know you would never cut up your pregnant wife. It's. I honestly wonder, in anyone, if you know of a book or a documentary or anything like that is like a somewhat serious examination of the psychology of like women who fall in love with serial killers or that sort of thing. If you know any like good resources to deep dive on that, put them in the chat. That's definitely one of those things. And what I was getting at with all of this is like, if you have no scruples, like you might be not having as much success in your dating life as you could because you have like scruples of not wanting somebody who's super needy and just wants to get in a codependent relationship with you because they don't want to be alone. And if you're willing to put aside those sorts of scruples, then man, you could like you could like become a serial killer that murders women and have a courtroom full of women that are sending you love letters. What documentary? Yeah, the Boogie documentary. Let's see. Your name's soft or Puppy Soft. Your name sounds stupid said aloud. It reminds me of like the what's it called? The toilet paper commercials. I don't know. I don't remember what it was. I know there's Angel Soft, but there's like the toilet paper commercials where they got like they're rolling out the toilet and like the little puppies are playing with the toilet paper. Yeah. Damn, she's talking shit about kids. That's serious racism. Yeah, because don't you know that interracial children are going to hell? I mean, like that's like what again? Like this was somebody that I had known since I was 3 or 4 years old, and it had been like a family friend. And she's just like her personality. It's like all of his beliefs were poured into her, and she became the militant one who would like spit them out with venom, while he was like the more like quiet person. I'm sure they must have had some pillow talk about how you know, race mixing is destroying the white race, or whatever the hell. They must have had conversations where those ideas got into her head. But yeah, the Nazis loved the occult. Yeah, it does talk about like the sort of strange connections between like things like Nazism and yoga and different things like that. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, if you're a true crime fan and you don't know of any documentaries about that, that's kind of discouraging. I'm sure that there is some sort of like you know, obscure academic journal literature that is behind some like behind some sort of academic literature paywall that I haven't had access to since college. Oh yeah, so J666 is, and having power in the relationship, kind of a fantasy relationship. Oh yeah, online dating with a serial killer. I wonder. Yeah, that would make for like an interesting examination. Like if you could like go through the actual letters that they write between each other. I remember seeing this news article where this woman was trying to marry Charles Manson, and this was towards the end of his life, and later it became exposed that it was part of some sort of scheme to where, as his wife, she would have custody of his body, and basically wanted to put his body on exhibit after he was dead. And that at least makes more sense to me. Like if you're running some sort of scam, then it's like, okay, now I understand why you'd want to marry Charles Manson. Because that, I mean, if you put up something that was like you know, Lenin's tomb, or you know, the Mao's tomb or something like that, like, yeah, I could see how that could be, you know, a lucrative side hustle. And I feel like America needs more crazy, kitschy amusement stuff like that. You know, remember back in the day when they'd have like the world's biggest house shaped like an orange and stuff like that. All those like weird hotels and buildings in the 50s that used to be roadside attractions. I feel like we need to go back to that as a country, instead of the generic. I'm sure some of you have probably seen that meme that says this is what every town off the highway looks like. Every town in America off the highway looks like this, or something like that. Some of you have probably seen that meme, but yeah, ever since corporate America has basically gutted all the personality out of our country, all the regional differences, most of the interesting, charming, kitschy little things that you might find on the side of you know, Route 66 or whatever. It's now we just live in this bland, same-looking world where everyone's eats at the same 5 restaurants. But anyway, I feel like I had more videos queued up that said similar things, like different Vosh clips, and I found another video where it was basically like this more right-wing woman who was watching some of this stuff, and you know, basically amening the parts that made the left look bad, because that's definitely part of the right-wing grifter angle, is that you don't really focus on what, you know, leftism could mean in terms of things like, you know, labor rights, wages, practical things that might actually meet people's needs. They can never acknowledge the part of the left that wants practical solutions to the actual problems of people. They have to keep the conversation fixated on culture war issues who's going to use what bathroom, or who's going to be allowed on high school sports teams, which it really here's my solution, because I think Europeans, if there are any Europeans in the audience, might agree with this. I think we should abolish high school sports, and maybe even college sports as well, because my understanding is in Europe they don't even have that, and why people's tax money should be used for the high school football field or whatever. It's perfectly fine if they want to have like local teams, local leagues, but the idea that we have this whole sports system that is a part of the school, paid for with people's property taxes and things like that, is we just cut the Gordian knot by just abolishing it altogether. Now, I know that a lot of people are super invested in sports ball, especially in more rural and more red states, so they'll never actually go for this solution. But I'm just saying, just have private clubs, and then you can decide your own rules about who gets to play and who doesn't, and it doesn't have to be this, because to me it's, I guess now that I'm on this subject, I'll continue on this rant. I don't even know why I started ranting about this. I think when these discussions about who should be allowed to play what sport, I think you have to kind of take into account what is at stake. And there are certain contexts where I have to be brutally honest. I feel that there should be some consideration of like not letting certain people participate in this, particularly when the stakes are high in terms of like monetary gain, which they're not in high school sports. Again, who the hell cares? And it's some sort of event like the Olympics where entire nations have been known to systematically cheat, like China and Russia. And it's basically one of those situations where if you allowed accommodations for people taking hormones, and that gave them some sort of a competitive advantage, then countries like China or Russia, other countries that are trying to launder their reputation through winning gold medals, like they are going to exploit that to the hilt. And it will completely just change the nature of the competition. It's not as simplistic as that, and there are certainly sports where it wouldn't be an advantage. But I think, yeah, on one hand, there's a threshold of like, this does not matter, just shut the fuck up, and then there's another threshold of like, yeah, assuming you care enough to want sports to in some sense be fair, then you do have to take into account situations where this isn't just some young person that wants to participate in high school sports because that's part of the normal life of a student. This is like an international competition with prestige in which, nation states are trying to launder their reputation and will take any and all opportunity to cheat. Because, countries like Russia already had like systematic doping programs, and countries like East Germany used to cheat all the time, giving their players steroids and other things, steroids and other hormones. So you have to take in mind the possibility that there will be that kind of systematic cheating when you set the rules around things like that. But in most contexts, it just does not matter. But I think I started like getting on this whole rant because I was talking about this situation with Vosh is saying the left doesn't do enough and the right, and then there was like a right-wing grifter who comes on and says, yeah, amen to the part where the left sucks. Like, when are these leftists going to blah blah blah? And I mean, I get that. I get that the more identity politics, social justice, they do the larger cause, like the larger left cause no favors by just allowing, aiding and abetting the right into painting them in the corner. But at the same time, it's, again, intellectually dishonest to think that all the left cares about is identity politics. Because in one breath, the right, these right-wing media pundits and that sort of thing will say, like, oh, they're socialists. They're going to impose, like, Hugo Chavez style. They're going to turn America into North Korea. And then the next breath, they'll say, all the left cares about is identity politics. I'm like, which is it? Is there going to be a overthrowing of the capitalist class where the means of production are going to be handed over to the workers, and there's going to be like state-run enterprises? Or is this all just about keeping the capitalist structure we already have and making everyone use gender-neutral pronouns? Like, what exactly do you think the agenda of the left is? And the answer is that they don't really care because they're not intellectually honest people. So whatever is going to frighten people, motivate people the most at any given time. Sorry, hiccup. They like half these people, gun to their head, couldn't even explain what socialism is. It's just a scare word that they're using. But if more leftists were actually advocating for something like socialism or communism, then of course the Rupert Murdochs and their media empires are going to actually fear that. And it's just much more favorable terrain to fight on for them to complain about how, social justice this, identity politics that, because then they don't have to talk about how the major legislative accomplishment of the Trump administration was to pass yet another tax cut for rich people. How Trump's promise to reform healthcare was a complete and utter joke. How they have no plans, no actual anything that's going to fix anything. They're just the handmaidens of the rich as a party. And Trump did not drain the swamp. Trump continued that, and in fact put people like Betsy DeVos in his cabinet, which had no qualifications for her job. Her sole job was to make sure that the parties, her own family was lining their pockets and that sort of thing. Now, this was definitely one of those moments where I was going to segue into another topic, and then I got distracted. And like I was saying before, I'm going to catch back up on the chat. I definitely feel like managing this live stream thing, on one hand, you're trying to talk a lot to keep the conversation going. On the other hand, you need to do things like manage the chat. And I know I got the camera and the screen in basically opposite positions, but I'm trying not to leave completely dead air. Let's see. Yeah. Oh man, abolish high school sports. That would make rural states revolt. I honestly feel like this was one of those, like, I don't genuinely care that much one way or the other, but it's one of those, it's like a great rhetorical hand grenade to throw into the conversation. But just the very idea that of course, the right would obsess over whether or not trans people are going to play sports ball, like what team the trans people will play sports ball on. Like, it You just noticed the Chiron? Wow. All right. I'm going to take a 30-second break. I will be right back. And I don't know, for your amusement, maybe I'll just play another. You know what? Never mind. I'll be right back. All right, I remembered to turn on the microphone this time. And I'm checking. Yes, the microphone is on. Good. Anyway, there was something in my mind that I was like, I want to segue to that. And then it was right there. And then I just continued talking past it. And it just floated away from me. And this is why I'm not one of those people that streams like 8 hours a day. I admire people who can, but my brain just starts to unravel after a while. Anyway, I did think of one other thing, and it was related to the boogie situation, where I was talking about how essentially, okay, you want to give advice to young men, but on one hand, you have like the boogies of the world, who maybe under normal situations they should be happy to get like Arkansas 8s, and maybe they should stop being so shallow, and then they'll find like some sort of codependent relationship, and when you're on Team Intellectually Honest, there might be some hard truths involving giving advice to somebody like Boogie or some of the men that he played Magic with. On the other hand, you can find like codependent relationships and stuff like that. But there's another type of person. Let's call this person Dave. And I want to apologize to all of my other friends and acquaintances named Dave, and apology to you if your name is Dave. But this is one of those situations where I'm just going to use the guy's first name because Dave is a common name. But there was this guy I knew back in the day, and he was like the sort of person who was just a miserable bastard in real life, and online he was the sort of person who would just get in arguments with people on Facebook and drive everyone crazy. There was that sort of moment, like, what's the movie Mean Girls? Like, you know, how many of you people have been, offended or whatever by so-and-so? Like, everyone in the gym raises their hand. Like, there was one of those moments in a Facebook discussion thing where, like, everyone's like, oh my God, I can't stand this guy. And he eventually left the area. And like everyone was just so happy to see the back of this guy because he was miserable online. He was miserable in real life. And it's sort of harsh to say that he was a loser, but there was something about like certain people just have personality flaws that stunt them from being liked by other people, from having meaningful relationships. And they really, like, they have to work on themselves in ways that are not like, oh, you just need to, make your bed and go to the gym and dress nicer. It's like, no, you have fundamental personality flaws. You are what the kids today like to call an asshole. You seriously need to work on that. And that's the reason why not only can you not get a girlfriend, but nobody likes you in general, except for hangers on. Like this person, Dave, that I'm talking about. And one of his parents died. I can't remember which. I think it was his mother. And he got like $50,000, and he went through all of this money in less than a year. And a lot of it was just hanging out with people, like buying weed and letting everybody smoke, buying takeout food all the time for this entourage of hangers-on that suddenly found him interesting. Though he was throwing money around, and then when the money dried up, so did the people, except to the extent that like he was personally selling weed. So you'd still have some hangers-on that were like buying weed from him and that sort of thing. But like in his day-to-day life, he was like in his mid-late 30s or whatever, and he was like watching. He had like low-level like restaurant jobs, the sort of stuff that like if you work in restaurants, like you start out in places like dishwasher or maybe like prep cook or something like that. He I guess I don't know if he just never like hung on long enough at a particular place to like rise in the ranks of working at restaurants, but he just kind of had these like low-level menial jobs, and he probably barely afforded his apartment with roommates and stuff like that. But he had the kind of combative personality that just makes him unlikable by people. And one thing that I've noticed about some of these people who are attracted to the alt-right, and this goes to the idea that by the way, yeah, he was kind of like, oh, I'm against wokeness. He was one of those like, the leftist woke whatever. Like he was definitely one of those people. And so I'm in my mind, whenever I encounter people like that online, I sort of mentally calibrate like, okay, am I dealing with a Dave type of person? And when you're trying to consider as a political project how to win back men who have been disenfranchised from the left because it doesn't pander enough to their need to find a big titty goth girlfriend or whatever, you have to consider not only people like Boogie, who may be just like aiming too high under the circumstances. I'm not saying that he couldn't legitimately get, it's like when you expect LA 10s and you have like, yeah, okay, there's people like Boogie that have maybe overdrawn expectations, but then there are the people who just like miserable bastards and nobody likes them anyway. And I've noticed I have these certain like weird experiences and observations with some people on the right where on one hand they behave like trolls. They basically have this sort of like LOL nothing matters attitude towards the internet where they engage in saying provocative things and harassing people and trolling behavior, and yet they're almost like desperate for friends. And I actually had this experience with somebody on here on YouTube, because it's probably about a year ago or so. I made a comment, I made a video, and I got this response from somebody, and they're like, "Oh, I'd like to talk to you more about this on somewhere other than the YouTube comment section." And I invited him onto Discord, and ended up having this like drawn out conversation, and it went in two phases. Like phase one, this person, on one hand, told me a lot about themselves that was just like, I would not be that forthcoming with anyone, especially like I don't really care what kind of like parasocial relationship I might have with somebody on the internet. This person told me a lot of personal things about themselves and their life that like unsolicited, that on one hand, this person seemed like they were genuinely trying to open up and engage me on a personal level as a friend, trying to talk to me about things like RPGs and like trying to engage me as a friend, but also had the most provocative political takes and expressed them in provocative ways. And I for a while I played along with it, but it kind of reached a point where he basically admitted that he was sort of like an epistemological relativist, I guess you would say. Somebody who's just like, you can't really, who's to say what's really true? And it's like, well, you seem very emphatic about your opinions, and yet at a fundamental level, you don't really believe, like, your beliefs about epistemology don't merit the conviction you seem to have for your provocative opinions. And so the first phase of the conversation, I'm like, look, I know you're trying to like engage me in these very serious, provocative things, while also trying to engage me with like, being, trying to become friends with me or whatever. But you essentially, I can't take what you're saying seriously, because your own like beliefs don't even add up. And I honestly doubt the overall conviction of what you're saying. A few days go by, and this person like spontaneously engaged me out of the blue, because I'm the sort of person, like, I'm not online waiting for people to message me 24/7. I'm usually around devices where I can be contacted, but I'm not like just taking hours out of my day to hang out on Discord with random people, sort of thing. He asked me a question and presents it like, "Oh, I just want your opinion about it. I know," and I'm like, "I don't want to engage with you because like you're just trying to provoke some sort of thing, and you don't really, it's hard to take anything you say seriously, given that you don't really believe there's anything's like for certain true anyway." But eventually, this person made it clear. He said increasing, as I got baited into, and I was honestly baited into discussing what he was asking me about. And then when I started to react on like a more, I don't want to say emotional level, but like, gave a stronger pushback to the right-wing asshole ideas that he was pushing, there was sort of this mask-off moment where it's like, aha, I provoked you into reacting. Because that's like that's like the mentality of the internet troll. Like the mantra of the internet troll is the first person to care loses. Your whole deal as a troll is that you gotta say the most provocative things while taking offense at nothing. And he made it clear that he intentionally was trying to like get a reaction out of me. And I basically said, look, here's the thing. I know that you seem like you're trying to be friends with me. All of these things, like I said, he was talking about things in his life that it's like, I wouldn't discuss that with somebody I barely know in your situation. But he seemed like he actually wanted friends, seemed a bit like lonely, and I'll have enough respect where I won't totally go into the details of what he was discussing about himself. So he wanted to make friends. He probably felt fairly like isolated and all these things that people like Vosh talk about right-wing men. But at the same time, I said, like, look, you are like you're intentionally provoking me. Like you can either fuck off with all of the, attempts to provoke me. You can be like, you can troll me, or you can try and be my friend. These are mutually exclusive things. And then came out the blame reversal, you're the one who's getting upset. Like, how dare you? Like, it's your fault for getting upset at me for my attempts to provoke you. It's like, do you not see what you just did there? And there are a lot of people who cannot take, they will like be obnoxious. They will intentionally provoke you. And when you are provoked, it's your fault. It's your fault that they reacted. And like these people, probably everyone's met somebody like this in their life, and they're like insufferable people that everyone ends up like getting away from because they're like insufferable and toxic. And they don't seem to understand that when they're not actually correcting the situation by engaging in things like, trolling behavior and the sort of behavior that they're engaging in is sabotaging in terms of like trying to be friends with people and have friendly relationships. And so a lot of these people with these they can't take any accountability, any responsibility for their own behavior. Everything has to involve blame reversal. These are the sorts of things that you see in like, traits associated with like narcissism and other things that you can find in your local DSM diagnostics and statistics manual. They have these like, maybe not full-blown personality disorders, but these traits that are a social hindrance that make them make other people dislike them. And it's very strange because you end up talking in circles with these people where it's like, do you not understand that I'm saying if you're like, you can be my friend or you control me, otherwise like I'm not doing this whole thing. And if you expect, like, do not intentionally provoke me, gloat about how you succeeded in provoking me, and then try and blame reverse to me for like it's my fault that I reacted to your intentional attempts to provoke me. That's ridiculous. Like, this sort of behavior, I have no time or patience for it. If you are interested in being my friend or whatever, talking about casual acquaintance, chilling out and talking about things other than provocative political issues, like, if that's, like, you're gonna have to choose between behaving in the ways that I find acceptable or the ways that you seem like you get an amusement out of bugging me with. And again, it goes back to go back to what I was saying about right-wing people. These right-wing spheres that embrace men, the right-wing troll culture will say, yeah, you can say that edgy joke. We won't get offended. We'll still be your friend even if you behave this way. You can, you just act however you want. Like, there's that, like, kind of embrace, but then they become, I don't know, just like it becomes like an expectation for them where they suddenly can't understand why, they find themselves in situations with other people, and they get a negative reaction from behaving like an internet troll, right? It just doesn't, like, it doesn't sink into their brain. And so much, like, I feel like a lot of internet culture is, we're in this very awkward transitionary period. I hope it's transitionary period between the sort of internet as it was, where it was a much more faceless world, where of no social consequences. Like, people my age and even below were probably introduced to an internet where everyone was anonymous. You probably would never interact with this person again, and you said and did dumb and provocative things. Like, when I was young, it didn't take me. I didn't have internet in my own house until I was, like, I don't know, 16 or something like that. But even when I was 13 and I went on the internet for the first time, I was staying with my family for this summer, and my aunt was working on her PhD thesis, and I would go into her office and go on the internet, and eventually it just got to the point where I just start to get bored, and I used to go on these, like, message boards for the X-Files and Doctor Who. This was, like, the mid-90s at the time. And I had a couple of different things. And at one point, I just got so bored that there was this message board. And it's like, what's better, The X-Files or Doctor Who? And I had already had like separate accounts for posting in each of the message boards. And so I just I got bored. So I just started having like an argument with myself. Like I'd log out of one account and then, make some post and then like log into the other account and then insult myself and then like log into the other account and then insult myself again. It just out of sheer boredom of like being in this office for hours a day while my aunt was working on her PhD thesis. And so many other experience, like sooner or later you just like, you don't even think about like, okay, this isn't the real world. You just engage in behaviors, dumbass behaviors where the internet's not the real world. At some point, as the internet became less anonymous, as normies started to get on the internet, suddenly like the juvenile teenage boy behavior of the internet, there was like all these normies are like, why the hell are you behaving like this? And there are still the people who are like, what, who are you to tell me how to behave? This is the internet. And there's this clash between the people who grew up with that older internet ethos where trolling was like everybody engaged in some form of juvenile trolling behavior, and that became like a way of life in part of the culture of the internet, versus like normies with their Facebook profiles and their LinkedIn profiles and that sort of thing. And we seem to be in this transitionary period of like a lot of the culture war is over like, will these people who have sort of been socialized to adopt and espouse sometimes intentionally provocative beliefs for the sake of having this like troll mentality, will they win out against like the normies, or the normie culture of it being expected to like act like a grown-ass adult and show some basic level of respect for each other? Will that win out? At least that's kind of how I see what's going on with the internet and the culture war. But anyway, I'm going to backtrack a bit, because what I started to say about these people with these personality disorders is that there's this weird, like, deep sense of loneliness that a lot of these people who have these super, like, right-wing troll, like, denizens of Q-Chan or whatever it is now, that, like, there is this almost like quiet desperation for them to have friends and for them to have this social connection. But like I said much earlier in this stream, the real problem is that, yes, the right wing will be like, you slay king. It's the problem is feminism. You can't get a date because feminism. The problem is all this identity politics. But then when you actually stop and look at some of the people that are caught up in this, like, they feel embraced because they can behave like complete assholes and face no pushback for it. And then, like I said, they encounter somebody like me. I encountered this person who was used to that mentality, and I'm like, look, I'm not tolerating this. Like, I understand that you're trying to engage me in a friendly level, and maybe you expect your friends to just put up with whatever, like, trolling behavior you used to, but, like, I have no reason to put up with you because I have other things to do with my time, other friends, and that sort of thing. And if you can't, like, modulate your behavior to interacting with me, you can fuck the fuck off. And it's just like, I don't think he could really process it. And of course I ended up just like kicking this person and blocking them, because I don't want to deal with that person, because life's too short to deal with obnoxious people. And I feel like even though they're embraced by the right, they're taught to hate, distrust, not only hate and distrust other groups of people, but to foster a kind of toxic mentality that's self-defeating. Like if you can't, if people put up with whatever, if people just put up with your shit because like you have, it's the troll code to whoever gets upset first loses, whoever reacts first loses whatever stupid social game they're playing. If they're used to a milieu where it's almost part of it's part of the code to just put up with whatever bullshit that they pull, and then they have to go out and interact with normal people or people who are not going to tolerate that sort of thing. It's just they hit a social brick wall, and the more that they're pulled into these right-wing spaces, and the more misogynist and black-pilled and anti-social justice, and just refusing to even say look at the history of race relations in America because that's too woke or whatever. The more they get pulled into that, the more they become like, yes, the right-wing people are like, hey, brother, let me give you a man hug and I'll punch you in the arm while you recite the names of breakfast cereals. They may find camaraderie in that, but that's actually a very small circle that limits their lives. Like, the reality is, at the risk of sounding like, well, I have friends of color and I have trans friends and I have gay friends, like I'm not trying to be that guy, but just like brutally honest truth is, without these groups that are hated on by a lot of these right-wing shitheels, my life would be a lot like more closed and worse. Like, my life would be worse off without people of color and trans people in my life. And again, like, I know it sounds like I'm a white guy and like I have trans friends and black friends, and this is like, I'm not trying to do the token thing, but I'm just trying, like, on a human level of social interaction, of engaging with people, of relationships. Like, my life would be profoundly impoverished without the sorts of people that the right wing tells me to shun. And that's, for me, the real sad part of a lot of these people going down these right-wing pipelines, is that they're closing, it may, soothe their ego to be told that, you're not the problem, feminism is, and, of course they should put up with your personality disorders, and, sending dick pics to a girl is a completely legitimate way to get dates and that sort of crap. It may superficially coddle them, but it like shrinks their world and leaves them socially hobbled for dealing with situations where they might have to step out of that and interact with people that have been labeled, like deviants or degenerates or whatever by the alt-right morons of the world. But I'm going to take a pause from ranting so I can catch my breath and catch up on the chat. And I really wish I had some sort of like screensaver type thing to post. So it's not, I'm going to switch to this for a second, so I'm not like 100% in this stream. Let me see if I can catch up. All of which sounds like a personality disorder. I was a really annoying teenage libertarian. I did that shit all the time. Like, oh God, I'm so glad I never got hardcore into something like libertarianism. At some level, I felt a certain amount of like sympathy for the like certain aspects of libertarianism, but I always felt like, if you're concerned with personal freedom, then attempting to remove, like fixating entirely on the government as a source of power in your life is kind of a mistake. Because if your analysis is like personal liberty and freedom, they go through this essentially like mental gymnastics of trying to ignore the role that things like the economy, corporations, your employers, all these other, lots of other power centers that influence your life other than just the government, and just fixating over like taxation is violent theft. Like, I've never had somebody rob me and then build a highway for me, but it's just, yeah, again, like, it's not that there's no merit to those sorts of ideas, but it's so like hyper focused and to the point of just like, I can't even take it seriously as a political analysis. And then there's the people like Ayn Rand who like worship the capitalist Ubermenches, and to me that's completely ridiculous, because again, going back to life experience and working in the real world and having private sector jobs and that sort of thing, the sorts of people that Ayn Rand glorifies are in many ways hacks. Let's say that you found a company, right? Like you're Bill Gates or you're Jeff Bezos or you're whoever, or you're Elon Musk, who buys your ways into companies and then pretends that you've founded these companies, right? You retcon the history of who the actual founders are to make it seem like you're the founder, right? The reality of starting any kind of company is that although it does take a lot of work, it does take risk, and you probably will have to be engaged at some levels of management, that for an organization of any substantial size, most of these people will eventually delegate away pretty much everything of consequence. Like, what's his name? Bald man with penis rocket. He retired several years ago, and he probably could have retired long before and just, sailed around on his yacht, banging TV presenters like TV weather girls or whatever his new girlfriend is now. He could have done that years ago because, maybe when he was starting out, he shipped a lot of the Amazon packages himself, but eventually you hire somebody for shipping, then you hire for somebody for accounting, and you hire somebody for this and hire somebody for that. And I feel like anybody who's worked in one of these companies with it that starts out like that, and then you see it grow, and you usually the founders or the people who start out the company, they delegate themselves into uselessness, but they'll still go around doing things like rearranging the deck chairs and just making decisions because they can. And at a certain point, you hire people who are specialized for certain things. You hire people who are, more better qualified, more educated, smarter than you in a lot of things. And yet we still put a lot of these, these CEOs and people on giant pedestals when almost all of them, all of them, by the standards of like Ayn Rand's novels that, do nothing but suck off these sorts of people. By that standard, they all have feet of clay. Anyway, I started talking about libertarianism, but let me continue with the chat. Provocative trolling, bad faith. Yeah, to be honest, J666 says, to be honest, I love to hear myself speak. I'm very egotistical, even though I'm always feel like I'm the dumbest person in the room. Yeah, well, clearly, as you can see that I've been streaming for 2.5 hours here, that I also like to hear myself speak. But I also feel like tonight I feel like I'm saying a lot of things that, like, this should have been 5 or 6 separate videos, and I'm finally just spewing it all out in one live stream. So PGRO, Peter, do you think the left tends to push men away? I think Vosh expresses this. Wow, you might want to like rewind this stream all the way back to the beginning, because that's a lot of what this is about. So the short answer is I agree with Vosh that certain aspects of the left do that, and definitely the right has been able to paint the left into a corner as being all about identity politics and social justice and feminism and that sort of thing, and the left has in many ways enabled that. But I feel like what Vosh was going for, it was essentially a solution where it's like, okay, we got to take these young men and we gotta provide a mirror match strategy. I don't know how many of you play various games, but when you're playing, let's say you're playing Magic the Gathering, because I'm thinking that because of Boogie and various other things, like you like your opponent's playing a red burn deck, so you're like, oh, they're playing a red burn deck, well, I gotta play a red burn deck too. Well, sometimes that's not like, sometimes you need to counter that with not with a mirror match, but with say a different strategy like control. Like, okay, like, oh, you're gonna fireball me, well, counterspell. It's his approach is to try and give advice to young men, like they become like an Andrew Tate of the left, without all the grifting and pimping and general scumbaggery that lands you in a Romanian prison. But my take on it is that aside from, I guess, how would I put this? On one hand, I agree with Vosh about how the left has lost a lot of young men, And I don't have a problem with him giving advice to young men about how to be more self-confident, try and approach women or whatever. But at the same time, it's like not my wheelhouse. And that's what the Chiron's about. Is like I'm poking fun of the idea that left-leaning people and leftists and the left in general is supposed to suddenly come out and be these dating gurus for angsty young men, because that's going to trick them into or that's going to nudge them in the direction of left-wing politics and that sort of thing. It's just not everybody is cut out to give advice. And like I joke about getting big titty goth girlfriends. Like, I mean, again, you might not have been here for early in their stream. Like, I've had goth girlfriends. I've had, punk, metalhead, art school, that's sort of adjacent. Like, but how, like, am I going to give you dating advice about how to get those women? I don't know, like, Google what is personal chemistry. Okay. So yeah, again, I personally think that the left is kind of better off using those ideas as a springboard and playing to the vanity and the ego of a lot of these young men and be like, look at this, like this Andrew Tate guy, he's a fucking clown. He's like a wannabe Tyler Durden who's like, he's taking all this shit from movies from 1999 and putting this dumbass spin on it. Like maybe the point of life, like you like, yeah, your life sucks and you're working a grind, but you're not going to magically become happy or win the game of life by getting a fucking Bugatti. Okay. Like, grow the fuck up. And the reason that your life is a grind is because you're within a socioeconomic system trying to exploit you for as much of your labor value as possible while giving you as little as possible in return. And all the social safety nets have been broken down by the sort of ideas that people like the Andrew Tates and other right-wing grifters of the world, they're trying to soft pedal for you in under the guise of your anger towards woke SJW feminist pink hair, you're not getting laid, whatever. Like, you have to go, it's not that you have to explain Marxist dialectic, critical theory, whatever to them, but it's that you have to take the source of their alienation and reframe it in a way that points attention to, like, yeah, you're stuck in a menial job because of the economic circumstances in your life. Want to do something about the material circumstances of your life? Join the left. Want to be part of the party that is the handmaiden of the elite and the corporate oligarchy? Join the right. Like, take your pick. Let's see. Come on, Peter, coddled. We've been coddled for decades now. I don't even remember what the hell that was in reference to. Yeah, don't tread on me except for corporations. Yeah, sometimes I really wonder what they sometimes I really wonder what kind of world, not necessarily libertarian, not your garden variety of libertarians, but like the real hardcore, like, anarcho-capitalists, how they actually imagine the world to be on, like, a practical level. But yeah. Gotta catch the stream. Step 1 deodorant. Yeah, step 1 is like actually deodorant. Like, hold on, let me go back for a second, because there was that scene, like, where he's playing Magic with his friends, and it's just like, that, have you ever seen that meme? It's like, you can smell this picture. Like, I don't mean to be a dick. I bet all of these people, with the exception of Boogie, who seems kind of sketchy, like, I bet all of these people are cool people. And I'd hang out and play Magic with them. I'd hang out and play D&D with them. But, like, the joke is like, oh, can you smell this picture? It's like, yeah, I can smell this picture. At least based on my experience of game stores. Although I have to say that, like, 40K people seem to be, like, yeah, more hip to things like deodorant. I guess when I don't know. I don't know what it is about tabletop war games as opposed to something like Magic, but maybe this is like the lower barrier to entry to Magic or something. Yeah, I don't like. Jay says, I don't like the whole we need to do this to get them on their side one, not just help people. Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And also, like I said, you can't. There are some people you're just by that strategy, you're just going to hit certain walls. You can hit the walls of people who are not necessarily ready to accept hard truths that maybe they're lonely and socially isolated because they have personality shit they have to work on, and you have to deliver nobody likes you because you're an asshole is much more of a bitter, jagged pill to try and get people to accept than the sort of gently chiding of you need to. I almost feel like doing this in the Canadian accent because of Jordan Peterson, oh, you got to clean your room, eh? And when you clean your room, maybe if you dress a little better, eh? And went to the gym, then you'd be able to, maybe rise on the social totem pole, maybe not feel so bad about yourself, eh? And I realize that's not what Jordan Peterson talks like exactly. I can't quite match his accent, but I gotta be honest, there is a part of me that hears his Canadian accent and just cannot take him entirely seriously. It's not just his Canadian accent; it's like his particular, his voice in particular, and matched the pitch, the pitch of his voice combined with the Canadian accent. It's like you're not an entirely serious person. But I realize that some people just have this huge cult of personality about Jordan Peterson, and it's just, I think it gets swept up to the point where people come to this irrational defense of him, or they have irrational hatred of him. It's like, yeah, he probably says some things that are fair enough, and then he says some things that are ridiculous, but being a part of this cult of personality tends to polarize some people. But sometimes his points just seem kind of like it's like that's interesting, but then it's maybe there's a completely looking at it from the perspective that he's approaching it is not the only or the best way to look at it. I remember, for just an example, I remember seeing this video where he's talking about what do you do with people in society who are just not essentially smart enough to be of any use to society. I mean, that's kind of an interesting question, maybe a bit of an unfair question, because it depends on what the structure of society and what's considered useful. But he gives the example, his example is like the military. And the way he presents the argument is like, oh, they realized that there were a certain number of people that just when they were drafting people, that a certain number of them were just not smart enough to be of any use whatsoever. And it sounds like, yeah, that kind of sounds like a compelling argument to a lay person. But then again, having grown up as a military brat and knowing more about the military than the average person, not that I'm an expert in it, but I know enough, having grown up with soldiers my entire life and on military bases, that I understand that in spite of what you might think of the cliche of oh, you just give some guy a gun and send him in a pillbox, that you have to be actually probably slightly smarter than at least average or slightly smarter than average. That the curve for being halfway useful in the military is well above, is above things like McDonald's or a retail store, because stupidity and incompetence get people killed. And the military often deals with highly technical things. My father had a degree in aeronautical engineering. It's not like the intelligence curve. He's presenting it as if there are some people so stupid not even the military could find any use for them. On the other hand, it's the reality is military, the intelligence curve for what the military, what you actually need to succeed in the military is significantly higher than he seems to be giving it credit for. But Yeah, and then he'll just also make like just weird arguments like, oh, hierarchies of lobsters. But again, I'm not 100% for or against Jordan Peterson, but he's definitely one of those people where you're either supposed to fall into the cult of personality where everything he says is the word of God because he is your internet Canadian stepfather who finally told you to be a real man by making your bed and that sort of thing, or he's the worst right-wing grifter since whatever. And yeah, let's check the chat. Is the chat really not? Yeah, somebody says you have to be functional to afford Warhammer. Yeah, that's true. But I sometimes wonder about, Magic's one of those weird things where it can go either way because you can get into it for relatively cheap, but you can also throw thousands of dollars. Like, you can spend, hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars on individual cards. And that's, my attitude towards it, and I honestly don't remember the last time I actually sat down and played Magic, but I reached a point years ago where I could never be involved. Like, I could never deal with any kind of pre-constructed Magic sort of thing where I was playing standard or modern or something where I'm chasing the meta and spending hundreds of dollars on cards to deck build, not just because of the expense, because I learned the game in 1995 and I grew up in a cultural backwater. So it came out in 93 and it really took till, early 95 for me to even become aware of it because I grew up in a complete cultural backwater. But in a lot of ways, if you just look at Alpha, most of the things are still there and they just added on additional thing. Like, they added on planeswalkers, they added on abilities. So there's certain aspects of the game that have gotten more somewhat between more interesting and more bonkers. But again, you go back and look at Alpha, everything black is overcosted, red's gonna do burn and this, that, and the white's gonna do this. Like, the game has not really changed in almost 30 years in that regard. Well, I guess, yeah, it has been 30 years now. Because it came out in 93, like Gen Con of 93. So the game's 30 years old now. And the core of the game has not really changed. And it's kind of right that it has. But after a while, it just kind of feels kind of samey. Or they'll occasionally just have things that are just ridiculous. And so my preferred way to play Magic would be something like Draft or Cube, which is basically just like a pre-made draft set. Or literally some situation like if I were to meet somebody in a Magic shop, I'd rather buy, let's just grab some pre-constructed decks from the store and play with those rather than anything I build myself. Or it's not Draft, it's I guess construct. I always forget the name of this format. Basically, you get 6 booster packs. You build the 40 card deck out of 6 booster packs. Usually, they'll have sets that come out. Whenever a new set comes out, they'll do a pre-release thing that will have these boxes that come with a spin down dice and 6 booster packs for this purpose. Any kind of Magic that it's putting pre-constructed or constructed on the spot decks against each other rather than some meta chasing deck that I poured $1,000 into. I just find that more for want of a better way to put it, low level Magic is actually more fun than okay, I spent $1,000 on this deck that's going to win with a turn 2 combo. That's just dumb. Have you heard any Norm Finkelstein? Just curious. I don't think so. I liked Peterson more after I found out he was on pills. Yeah, explains a lot, doesn't it? Did I ever watch Satanic Panic: The Search for Satan PBS documentary? I want to say maybe it was one like if it was accessible on the internet, I probably have. I did buy an interesting book. Hold on a second. This I found at when I was at Powell's Books in what's it called? Portland. But yeah, I've started to read this. It's definitely a fascinating. It's still a fascinating topic and like sadly relevant, given all the QAnon drama. But I was thinking the other day that part of the reason that how to put this, I don't want to say that QAnon works better in terms of like spreading as an idea, but with the satanic panic, it captured like a wide swath of people got sucked into it, and it was reported by, you know, like it caught on with the general public. But then on the other hand, it was so like, because the targets could be anyone, that it at a certain point, I don't know. All right. Apparently, this that thought that I've been trying to articulate was not ready for prime time. But there's basically a difference between the satanic panic, which is like, you know, the Satanist cabal could be anyone, and QAnon. It's like the same ideas, but it's more limited in scope to like, now it's specifically like Democratic politicians. It's Hillary Clinton drinking the adrenochrome, and I feel like there's an important difference in like how the ideas function, because even though it is a lot of the same bullshit, it is definitely I don't want to say more plausible. I again, the thought I'm trying to have in my head is not ready for prime time, because I can't even come up with the right way to articulate what I'm trying to say. Anyway, speaking of not being able to articulate what I'm trying to say, let's see. I feel like it's probably about time that I end the stream, although views 89, 9 concurrent viewers. Wow, that's actually, I'm surprised. It's like, I'm about to get off the street. Oh, wait, people are actually watching. Wow. Because it seemed like before, when I was just like glancing back and forth, I was what's it called? I was it seemed to like peak at about 3 viewers. Are any of you into Dungeons and Dragons? Oh, hopefully this isn't the sort of thing that gets my stream like I don't say banned, but yeah, I don't know how. I have no idea how the copyright works with this shit. But I'm honestly not sure if I've seen this or not, so I'm gonna cue this up and try and refresh my memory.
Two troubled women.
Also, give me a little bit of a break to catch up on the comments.
Both sought help from some of the top doctors in the country. The diagnosis: satanic ritual abuse.
It was like going deeper and deeper into an abyss.
After millions of dollars in...
Just, I'm wondering, though, have there been any actual cases, aside from just, you know, shit on message boards? Has anyone actually come out and said that, like, Hillary Clinton drained my adrenochrome or anything like that yet? Have, like, the crazy eyewitness people come out for QAnon, or is it all just completely internet fluff? That's what I'm wondering.
In treatment, the women now say the doctors were wrong.
It stopped because I stopped following Dr. Braun's orders.
Tonight on Frontline, the search for Satan.
Funding for Frontline is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you. This is Frontline.
When I look back, I can't believe it ever happened to me.
You could join therapy.
Mary S. spent 3 years in psychiatric wards, diagnosed as a victim of satanic ritual abuse.
You and Bobby ruined it.
I was told that I was raised in a satanic cult. And when you're raised in a satanic cult, you abuse people, even the people that you love.
Everybody around you's in the cult. You don't know what it is to be a person.
Yeah, this is, no, I have not seen this. Shit. And now I feel like an asshole. Yeah. I think I'm going to wrap up the stream. But now that I'm watching this and reacting to it, at some point, this is something that I've thought about for a while. You know what movie I haven't seen in a long time? And again, I put off dealing with it because it's one of those, am I going to get copyright issues for doing this? So I might have to not do a live stream version of it. But a reaction to Jesus Camp, because I haven't seen that movie in a long time. And it's sort of difficult to understate the extent to which things like that influenced me at the time and got me involved in things like YouTube atheism. And yeah, it's interesting to think that some of those kids are probably out voting now and running for Congress and storming the Capitol and that sort of shit. And that would be an interesting live stream / watch thing or whatever, where I go back and watch Jesus Camp again for the first time. It's probably been more than a decade now, so it's been long enough where it would be not fresh but an interesting thing to revisit, especially in light of the current state where the Speaker of the House is now like a fundamentalist, young Earth creationist and that sort of thing. But it is almost 11 o'clock, and to be honest, all these like lights in my face are starting to give me a headache. So that is going to be my stream for now, in spite of a few technical difficulties, like not getting the chat to show up on screen in that good 4 or 5 minute period where I was muted. I think that it went pretty well, at least in the sense that I felt like I talked about things that I've been meaning to talk about for a long time, but I'm just so lazy about making videos, and that's kind of why I ended up doing this. It's like I'm going to pretend that I'm going to give people advice instead of, like I'm going to have this like live show where I'm going to interact with people and pretend to give them advice and that sort of thing. Well, simultaneously like playing clips and talking about this, and it saves me the business of editing. And when I edit a lot of this stuff, I'll make a half-hour thing and spend an hour and a half editing it because I get perfectionistic about taking out every little pause and unnecessary draw of breath and hiccup or whatever. And it's this sort of a time-consuming aspect of it is kind of lazy, although it took me a while to set up all this crap too. There was one point where, speaking of my microphone being muted, there must have been something. It must be OBS is what I'm starting to think. Deep within the Windows properties, my microphone was muted. So I'm seeing like the register on the interface that it's picking up sound and everything's wired correctly. And then I finally figured out that when I went into where you in Windows where you select the microphone, and then you go to properties, and then you go to like the levels that it was muted. And I was like, why the hell did that happen? So I unmuted it, and the same thing happened again opening OBS later, and so I knew exactly where to go, and sure enough, it was muted again. So I'm wondering if like OBS was muting the microphone source for some reason. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Anyway, yeah, so there were some technical difficulties with setting this up too, but this is more content this is like a year's worth of content in 3 hours or whatever. So thank you to everyone who stopped into the chat. Greetings to anyone who's watching this after the fact, and have a good whatever time it is. And I realize it's late now, but it might be early morning when you watch this. And goodbye.